Okay, welcome back. This is lesson 2, and now we will look at the data and download it first, and then read it with Pandas and do some preprocessing. I already have imported Pandas, and here this is the data is located, so we will need to download it again. I will use wget for that. Here, this is $sign data. This is how you refer to variables that you have in your Jupyter. So this actually it gets replaced by that. And let's save it in that week 3 file. So now we use wget for that. You don't have to use wget. I saw this question a couple of times, like how does this actually work? So this exclamation mark means that we're executing a shell command. Here it runs on Linux. So in Linux, there is this utility wget, and you can use that. Or if you don't have it, you can just click on this save link S, and then you can just save it with the browser. Okay, so we get the data. Now we need to read it. And for that, we use Panda read CSV function, and I saved it in this data week 3 file. So let's put it into a data frame variable and take a look at it. Right, so we already saw it. So we have all these variable, and there are quite a few columns here, like 21 column. And it's quite difficult to see, to look at all of them, especially since we have this dot here, so not all columns are displayed. To take a look at all the columns at the same time, what I usually do is I transpose the data frame. So I take the head, like the first 5 rows, and then I do this .t, which is like similar to NumPy. It transposes the data frame, so it rows become columns. And here, like this row number 0 here is this is the row number 0 in not transposed data set. So this is basically the customer number 0 in our case, this customer number 1, and so on. And we can see this way, like we can see actually all the variables, all the original columns of our data set. So we can see that, yeah, so we have things like senior citizen, partner, whether they live with partners or not, dependents, if they have dependents, the customer's tenure is how many months they are with the company, like all these things. Yeah, and the most interesting one is this churn, right? So this is actually what we want to predict. And again, we see that like here we have sometimes it's lowercase, sometimes capital case. Yeah, the same with variables. So it's not consistent, it's not uniform. And what we want to do is do the same thing as we did in the previous session. So when we were preparing the data frame with car prices, so we want to do the same thing here. So let me just type it. Okay, so I finished typing this code. It's doing the same thing as we did in the previous week. So if you're not sure what this code does, check the data preparation lesson from previous week. And now we can see, let me type it again. We can see now it's more uniform. So all the column names are lowercase, and we replace all spaces with underscores. Yeah, so now it looks a bit more uniform. Now let's take a look at the data types that we have, D types. You can see a few interesting things here. So first of all, this senior citizen is actually a number. So it's not a string, like not yes or no, like in other cases, it's an integer. So it has values 0, 1. So these total charges, it's an object, right? So it should be a number, but it's not. Let's take a look at this these total charges. So yeah, it looks like a number, but it's an object. So for some reason, something is yeah, maybe some of the values are not numbers. So let's check. So for that, what we can do is now take this and convert it, try to convert it to a number. So for that, there is a function Pandas called toNumeric, which takes in a series and produces, it tries to convert it. And you see that it complains that it enables to parse string underscore at this position. So here it means that it doesn't just contain numbers, it also contains things that aren't numbers. And the reason for that is in this data set, space means not available, so the data is missing. They denote it with a space, and we replace spaces with underscores. And that was treated it as a string, as an object. That's why it replaced all the spaces with underscores. What we can do is we can just say, okay, if Pandas, if you don't know how to parse this string, just replace it with not a number. And for this, there's a parameter called errors that you say coerce means ignore them and write them as not a number. Yeah, so for example, we can call it total charges. Right, and we can see, so here probably some of the values are null here. Yeah, indeed, 11 values are missing, and we can take a look at what's going on here. So yeah, so this way is difficult to see. Let's just look at customer ID and total charges. We see that indeed for all these customers, this total charges value is missing. So what we want to do is now we just want to replace this so this column total charges with converted value. So let's replace it. And what we can do immediately is we know that there are missing values. We can just fill them with zeros. Fill an A 0. Just write it back. So now all the missing values are 0, which maybe is not the best approach because yeah, maybe they actually did spend some money, but it's missing. We don't know. And 0, as we discussed previously, is not always the best approach in terms of common sense, but often in practice it's okay. So one last thing that we wanted to do was yeah, we checked if all the columns read were read correctly. Now let's look at the churn variable. So we have this churn variable, yeah, which is a yes or no. For machine learning, for classification, we are actually interested in not yes or no values. We're interested in numbers. We don't care about yes or no. What we need here is 0 or 1. So 1 is churn, positive example, and 0 is not churn, negative example. So for that, we can find all the values that are yes using this. So first, let's just make it smaller. So instead of looking at the entire series, we will look at first 5. So the first 5. So we see that if something is yes, then it gets true. If something is no, it gets false. And then now what we can do here is we can replace it with a number, as we did previously in the previous week. So yeah, so this is how we replace yes and no with 0 and 1, because we know for yes it's 1, the customer churned, and no customer didn't churn, so it's no. So what we need to do now is we just need to write it back to churn. Okay, this is probably sufficient for now. So now what we did is we looked at downloaded the data, prepared it, looked at this a little bit, then we spot an error with total charges, we fixed this error, and we converted our churn variable into a binary column with just zeros and ones. And in the next lesson, we will set up the validation framework and we will split our dataset in 3 parts.